Greetings, everybody. Welcome to Live Stream Saturday as I get my microphone set up and everything, and camera set up, and get to know what it's like to get set up for a live stream. Okay. Welcome, everybody. I am glad that people are going to be showing up today. Don't know how many yet. I was looking on some information about YouTube channels. I need about, 1,000 to 10,000 people before I can do a community announcements so people can know that I'm doing a live stream. Oh, well, that's just how it goes. Or I can do recordings of these and post them as a premiere. But I like doing live streams better, much easier. And I do better in front of a live audience than I do just sitting around. Anyway, welcome, everybody. And we're going to go ahead and get started. So if you're going to be viewing this on Facebook, just know that I'm using YouTube channel live stream function for from now on, because the Facebook channel is pretty much live stream is pretty difficult. I don't know if it's my computer or whatever it is. It just doesn't seem to work right in Facebook. It drops, the picture drops, the quality drops. The sound goes in and out. Sometimes the screen goes blank. I don't know if the camera's still on or not. Other things like that are going on. But anyway, I'm going to be continuing today on Daniel chapter 5. Now, some people are asking, sent me some messages, what about Daniel chapter 2 and 3? Well, I did those on Facebook. I thought of posting those and downloading them. And I downloaded them, but the quality, since Facebook has changed into this new live streaming system, when I download them, the video quality is so bad that you can't really watch it. So I'm going to redo Daniel's chapter 2 and 3. I'll probably do a recording or maybe go live just for you guys. And that way you'll have Daniel's chapter 1 through 5. Hopefully I'll have those done. I can even probably do it after I do this and do another segment and put Daniel chapter 2 if you want to stay on for that. So let's just go ahead and get started. We're doing Daniel chapter 5. We saw Daniel chapter 4. Now in Daniel chapter 4, I'm going to bring my scriptures up so I can read them. In Daniel chapter 4, we saw a lot of different things. You saw, if you listen to how I teach, I go through everything. I go through the meaning of names. I look at the meaning of numbers or what the numbers mean, because everything has a purpose in the Bible. God is very intelligent, more intelligent than most theologians give him credit for, most people in seminaries even think of. God can speak through the Bible using the meaning of names and numbers, and it contains and adds depth to the meaning of the text. It doesn't take away from it, and doesn't add anything new, or all it does is helps add to the story little nuances that otherwise you will miss, and you will not understand what is going on. That's what happens with a lot of Bible studies. They don't tell you the backstory, the historical context, what's going on. I try to include all that in here. So we're going to go to Daniel chapter 5, very interesting chapter. Then we'll go into chapter 6 and 7, where we start getting into some heavy-duty Bible prophecy. And this heavy-duty Bible prophecy, talking about Daniel's dreams and stuff, don't miss that. Don't miss that, folks. And if you're new, whatever, tell people to subscribe to this channel so I can get this channel going, and I'll try to do more on it and get it up there into the realm of at least 1,000 members, so I can do a little bit more and notify people I'm doing live streams. With that, welcome everybody. We're going to go right into Daniel chapter 5. And remember, I do a little differently, but I also follow the traditional methods of Bible interpretation and study of Bible prophecy. I look at the commentaries like everybody else, but I also look at Greek and Hebrew and Aramaic meanings. A lot of this was written in Aramaic, and then later on, I think it's chapter 5, later in chapter 5 or chapter 6, they start writing back in Hebrew. This book goes back and forth between two languages. Just want to let you know. Okay, let's get your coffee ready. Let's go. Daniel chapter 5, verse 1, and we're probably going to go slow at first so you can understand the backstory, what's going on, who these people are. Daniel chapter 5, verse 1. Belshazzar, the king, made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords and drank wine in the presence of the 1,000. That sounds pretty benign. Sounds like a king's just having a party, like the kings always do, having a big whoop-de-doo, right? Well, let's look at Belshazzar's name. Belshazzar's name means the Prince of Bel, not the Prince of Bel Air, but the Prince of Bel. Bel means Lord in the Mesopotamian pantheon, okay? It means a god. It means a prince of a god, and that's what it actually means. So he's a prince of a god, and at that time in Babylon, the prince of the main god of Babylon was Marduk, a dragon, okay? Enough said on that. So you have the prince of Bel, Marduk, the dragon. The king made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords and drank wine in the presence of thousands. And why was he doing this? Well, the reason they did this was that it was a custom of pagan religious rites to invoke a god's protection and blessings through sex magic rites and debauchery from a conquered god's utensils that they captured. They do this to earn favor of that god or goddess because they know in their own pantheon, the more debased you get, it pleases the gods, and and they'll give you favor. Okay, sex rite magic. That's what they're practicing here. I'm not kidding you. That's what they're going to do with the temple stuff, as we'll see, the temple things they got out of the temple of Jerusalem. And so why were they doing this? Well, here's the backstory that the commentaries will tell you. The Medes and the Persian armies came in and invaded the Babylonian Empire, and they're on the throes of overthrowing it. Now they surrounded the city of Babylon. Babylon had, 327 foot tall walls, 87 foot wide. They had gardens, and they could grow their own food on there. The river Euphrates went under the wall. It was a marvelous accomplishment. So therefore, Babylon was a city that could withstand long sieges without any problem. And so they were surrounded. The kingdom is being taken over by the Medes and the Persians. And so this guy, the Prince of Bel, the Prince of Marduk of Babylon, of mixture, of confusion, of bringing confusion and mixture and synthesis into the world. That's what the cult world does. He made a great feast for thousands of his lords or his elites, and he drank wine in the presence of the thousands. In other words, they were going to do some sex rite magic in order to earn favor to lift the siege off of Babylon. We'll find this in this very chapter here on as we go. And has anything really changed? When people just think for a second. When you're in trouble, people reach for their lucky rabbit's foot. Or they throw salt over their shoulder. Or they start doing some superstitious rituals. Do you know where that comes from? It comes from a lot of this stuff. And these practices, they just took the sex magic out of them. And the spirit cooking, as John Podesta would talk about. Here we have head people of state in our own government whose emails show that they like spirit cooking. We have record of them attending the Bohemian Grove, Burning Man celebrations. A lot of them were guests on Epstein's ranch and island, like Hillary and Bill Clinton. And a lot of sex rite magic and junk was being invoked. And there's a lot of sickening stuff going on in the world of the elites that do invoke gods for their protection and favor. They call them gods, or spirits, or energies, or forces for their protection and blessing. And they have to do these grotesque sex rite things, and like drinking body fluids. I won't get any more explicit than that, as well as blood and other things. And so if you don't think I'm correct, you need to study the feast of Dionysius or Bacchus, the same deity. And that was pretty much, William Shakespeare wrote Midsummer Night's Dream based on the feast of Bacchus. It's just kind of telling you, give you some background of what and why they were doing this. They wanted to invoke the gods' favor by getting as debased and debauched as possible in order for them to be pleased, so that they'll lift this siege off of Babylon. Look at verse 2. While he tasted wine, Belshazzar, the prince of Bel, or Marduk, gave the command to bring the gold and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar, and Nebuchadnezzar means Nebo protects the crown, or may Nebo protects the crown, had taken from the temple which had been in Jerusalem, the city of peace, that the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. Okay, again, sex magic rites. There's heavy duty occultic rites going on here. So they brought out the gold and silver vessels from the captured from the temple in order to do this, to earn this, the God Almighty's favor, because they just thought him as being just a temporarily a head god. Another god will overthrow him, but if he wants to stay in power over Babylon, then he's going to have to do their bidding. Okay, that's basically what they were doing. So let's look at some of the names and see the backstory here. So Nebuchadnezzar had a son, Belshazzar. Belshazzar was Nebuchadnezzar's son, and Nebuchadnezzar passed away. So this was, I can't remember the time frame. It was maybe 40 some years after Nebuchadnezzar's death. So Belshazzar has been on the throne for quite some time. Nebuchadnezzar, remember, repented and became a believer in the Lord God Almighty. Things went well with him, but however, he passed away due to old age, and so he had a son. And he named his son Belshazzar, the prince of Bel, the prince of Marduk. Why would you name your son that way? He probably named him before he had his epiphany about who God is. So anyway, so Nebuchadnezzar means may Nebo protect the crown. So Nebuchadnezzar wanted to protect his bloodline, so that a world leader will arise through his bloodline in order to rule and govern the world in what we would call today, and modernize the terms, a new world order. Okay, just want you to think about it. I'm going to modernize this a little bit so you can understand what's going on. So you had Nebo, this scribe god, who was to help bring the sun deity, who would be the ruler that comes into the bloodline to rule the world. May Nebo protect the crown's bloodline. And he had a son called the Prince of Bel. So he was hoping that his son would be that very leader. So a lot of these blood rites, I want to tell you, and Tom Horn wrote a book about this, and I think on Skywatch TV, and he talked, and I think, oh boy, I cannot remember the name of it right off the bat, but they talking about the rites were to invoke a spirit to inhabit the ruler. A very Egyptian quality, but Mesopotamian as well. It's the same thing. So the idea was that you would name your child what you want him to be, the Prince of Bel, this one world leader. Okay. So there's one world leader. And so they do these sex rites magics in order to release the sun deity out of the abyss, because he did something bad and he's sent in the abyss, and he has to be loosed and set free. So they're trying to set this entity free in order to rule the world again. Okay, goes back to Genesis chapter 6 and all that. Maybe I'll get into that a little bit later. But the idea here was to get the vessels of silver and gold from Jerusalem and from the temple and do their sex rite magic to earn favor with this particular god, that he would lift the siege. Okay. So he had his kings, his lords, his wives, and concubines might drink from them. This was not some innocent little party in Hollywood or something. This is a debased, occultic, sex rite magic going on. Pass his wives, his concubines around. All kinds of gross things were going to happen with those utensils. I just want you to understand something, the backstory, what's going on. Like I said, the city of Babylon, a mixture and confusion, was in peril right then because they were surrounded by enemies. Then they brought the gold vessels in verse 5, and chapter 5, verse 3. Then they brought the gold vessels that had been taken from the temple of the house of God, which had been in Jerusalem, and the king and his lords and his wives and his concubines drank from them. That means they started to whoop it up and start having the sex rite stuff. They're getting lit up. They're getting intoxicated in order to numb them out to what was about to take place. And drinking body fluids, drinking blood, maybe even some sort of sacrifice going on with these utensils. They were really going to whoop it up. That's what they're going to that they were in the middle of this. Verse 5, in the same hour, the fingers of a man's hands appeared and wrote opposite the lampstand on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. And the king's countenance changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that his joints of his hips were loosed and his knees knocked against each other. When it says the joints of his hips were loose, that means he wet his pants. I bet you didn't know that. Here it says Prince of Bel got so scared. He's supposed to be the world leader, the one that's supposed to rule the world, got so scared that he wet his pants. His hips were loosed. That's what that means. He probably did number 2 in his drawers as well. And his knees knocked against each other, because this was quite frightening. This was a sight never seen before. People talk about God, they talk about their spirits and all this stuff, but the actual manifestation of God Almighty and what he can do will knock the and scare the what out of you, okay? Because this was beyond comprehension, beyond the norm, whatever. Then the king cried aloud to bring the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. Now let me explain who these wise guys are. The king cried out to bring the astrologers. The astrologers are conjurers and enchanters and necromancers. That means people who communicate with the dead spirits. So he cried to bring the astrologers, those ones conjurers who do conjuring rites, the enchanters, and the necromancers. He wanted them right in forefront. They're probably in the audience already, but he brought them right then and there and to him. He wanted to find out what's going on. Then the Chaldeans were the elites. And the elites are mentioned as all in verse 1. Look at verse 1. The thousands of lords that drank from his wine, okay? The elites, the Chaldean elites, the clod breakers, the one who like to mix things together and enter into new lands, okay, new realms. They're the creme of the creme, the super elites. Nothing has changed. We have those wanting to rule and rule society because they think they're pretty much narcissistic in their outlooks, and they think they can control people. We have people who if you don't believe me, just look on the news. If you live in California, Los Angeles, how's your governor working for you? How's your governor in Michigan doing? How's New York City doing in New York? I mean, you have some pretty wacky power tripping head narcissists there who think they know better than you how to run your life. And they're using a pandemic to enact laws and do things otherwise they could not, because we're under a public emergency due to a pandemic. So they're abusing the system big time. So these are the type of elites. This is what elites do. And the soothsayers. The soothsayers are interpreters of omens. They're the prophets of the dark arts. So they're dark art prophets. They're prophets. They want to foretell the future, tell what omens mean and stuff. So he called these head honchos before him and saying to these wise men of Babylon, whoever reads this writing and tells me in his interpretation shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around his neck, and he shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Well, the wearing of purple and the gold around his neck just indicates your status, that you're the number 3 top dog in the Babylonian system of government, if you can interpret the dream. Now all the king's wise men came, but they could not read the writing or make known to the king its interpretations. Excuse me. Just got up in the morning trying to get my morning voice, get that cragginess out of my voice here. So, okay, verse 10. Then the king, the prince of Bel, was greatly troubled. Verse 9, his countenance was changed, and the lords were astonished. And the queen, they could not tell or read the interpretations. And here these guys are supposed to be doing, get the picture. I'm trying to help you here. Get the picture. These people could not tell what this hand of God that wrote on the wall, what it meant. They could not tell. He was perplexed and troubled because they were getting ready to do sex rite magics to invoke the gods' helps. Now, this very gods they're trying to evoke their help would not tell him the interpretation. So he was greatly troubled because he knew something was not right, because, he wet his drawers, basically. It caused him to lose his bowels. That's how frightened he was. And now No one could tell him what it means. Was this an omen that the siege will be lifted, or what? Or did he just please the gods or goddesses somehow? He didn't know the God of Israel from anyone. He didn't even know who he was. He had an idea from his dad, but he did not recognize him. He was just as proud. He thought he was the head honcho, the ruler of the universe, so to speak. He was the God incarnate. He found out that he ain't right then and there. The God incarnate wet his pants. He ain't no God. He wasn't no world ruler either. And then chapter 5, verse 10, talking about the queen. You can say the better interpretation, I'm reading out of the New King James, but a good way to say it is not his wife, but the queen mother. In other words, this is grandma. This was Nebuchadnezzar's. This was his mother. I mean, okay. The queen mother. Okay. Do you understand that? So the queen or the queen mother, because of the words of the king and his lords, came to the banquet hall, and the queen, I'm imposing some meaning here so you can understand it. And the queen mother spoke, saying, "O king, live forever. Do not let your thoughts trouble you, nor let your countenance change." Verse 11, there is a man in your kingdom whom is the spirit of the holy God. And in the days of your father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, were found in him. And King Nebuchadnezzar, your father the king, made him chief of the magicians, the astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers. So Daniel was over the magicians. Who were magicians? They weren't David Copperfield or any of these other people type. These were head practicing occultists. These were the high priest and priestesses. He was in charge of them. The astrologers, as I talked about, these are the ones, they all practiced the dark arts, and the soothsayers, the prophets, and all the elites. In other words, Daniel was pretty up there in the hierarchy, so to speak. So nothing could get past Daniel, or what these guys did. Nothing could get past him because Daniel would stop it. Okay, so he had a lot of enemies. That's what happens when you're a Christian. You end up stopping the dark arts, and you have the spiritual authority to trample on scorpions and all the works of the enemy. You have power. You have the ability to do spiritual warfare in the occult world, as well as other people who don't nothing about a spiritual warfare and being taken captive to do the devil's will and all that stuff. They don't like you because you have authority over them. So we need more Daniels, in the world than we do any more Christians to be like Daniel. Okay. And Daniel's name means God is my judge, so I can bear forth the judgment of God. So we need more Daniels who know that God is their judge. Do not, all want to be teachers because you come under stricter judgment, but he wants people who are humble, that knowing that God is their judge, so they can bear forth the judgment of God truthfully, honestly, and not for self-gain. We need more Christians like that who will make a stand against the works of the occult and do actual spiritual warfare, because there is a great thing going on now in the world that's amazing to me, especially in churches, and I've run across this, is that there's an idea that there's no need to do spiritual warfare anymore. That all the principalities and powers and rulers of darkness and the host of wickedness in heavenly places, as Ephesians chapter 6:12 talks about, have all been tamed, and there's no need. We can just have a free lunch and have it on easy street because Jesus did it all. Well, why did Paul write that after Jesus was already risen from the dead in Ephesians chapter 6, if everything is? Why did Peter warn us to be aware of the devil who walks about like a roaring lion? And these people understood spiritual warfare, and unfortunately, most of the church does not understand spiritual warfare. In fact, a lot of them don't even understand the full implications of what the salvific work of Jesus did on the cross, the fully implies or means, and the resurrection power that people have. They deny it. And look where we're at today with a pandemic designed to usher in a new world order, which we'll talk about in the later chapters. So that's who Daniel was. So verse 12, insomuch as Daniel was excellent of spirit, knowledge, and understanding, interpreting dreams and solving riddles and explaining enigmas were found in this Daniel, which is God is my judge, so I can bear forth the judgment of God. whom the king named Belshazzar. It means favored of Bel, to be keeper of his little treasure. That's exactly what it means. The keeper of a stringent treasure, but that's a kind of a bad thing. I look up the word stringent; it means little. So, so Nebuchadnezzar says, "I'm going to change Daniel's name. I'm going to make him just like the world, and he's going to be a keeper of the little treasure." That's him and his son. So when the Queen Mother was reminding him of who Daniel was, I got to tell you, Daniel was probably a little over 80 years old at this time. Roughly right around 80. He was an old geezer right now. He was 80 years old. That's pretty old for back then, when the average lifespan was around 40 years old to 50. 30 to 50 was the average lifespan back then. So Daniel was a pretty old guy. And all of a sudden, he's kind of pushed in the background. Nobody pays attention to him anymore because he's old. Old people are no good. They got, put him in the back burner. The older Christians don't know anything. That's just, you need the new. You need this. You don't need the wisdom. You don't need the experience that people have of many spiritual battles. Nothing has really changed at all. And so they want to name you Belshazzar, the favorite of Bel, to be keeper of his little treasure. In other words, they want Christianity to be keepers of the treasure, which is the Prince of Bel. They want the Antichrist to come back. And if you ever read Alice Bailey, I would suggest you don't. But if you are led by the Lord too, you download the PDFs and do word searches. Do word searches on government, radio, TV, education, and you'll find boom, 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 the 7 Mountain Mandate that is talked about, and that you have to take over everything in order to bring back what Alice Bailey called the Master Jesus, the Antichrist, to come back, and before that you have to lay a foundation and take over everything. I'm just telling it like it is, folks. People are wasting their time in spiritual warfare talking about taking over the 7 mountains. And I said this last night on the radio, and I'll say it again. And God has another way. And he's more interested he loves people. He cares about people. He wants us to be the hands and feet of Christ in order to bring people into the kingdom and set the captives free and do his works on earth. Okay, not take over the government, not take over the stuff. He knows that if we work on ourselves and change inwardly and become lights and salt, then we will preserve our homes and families. Our families will be turned around. That'll affect our churches. Our churches will turn around and in turn affect the community at large, the city, the town, the province, the city, the state. And I'm going to also say this again so you get an idea, and I'm going to get people mad at me. America was never founded to be a Christian nation. It was founded as a colony to exploit resources and people, okay? America became a land inhabited by Christians, much to the chagrin of those who founded the country back in the 1600s. So through persecution, Christians came in and they Christianized. So America became a land of Christians, and we brought Christian principles and ideas into the land and conflict with a governing hierarchy and elite. If you don't believe me, there's another history out there. There's different history books you can read. Some of them, you can read the Masons' view of world history. It's quite illuminating. I won't get into all the details on that, but basically America was founded to help usher in a new world order, okay? I'm just saying. But all of a sudden it came in conflict because Christians took over the country because people got saved in droves, and so they had an influence, and they influenced everybody else. And we held back darkness, and America, God blessed, because America became filled with Christians. Now America is becoming filled with pagans. And the hand of protection is off, and a lot of that is due to the church. I'm sorry, but it just is, because the church has been playing games, has been infiltrated. Their name has been changed to be favored of Bel, to be keeper of his little treasure. Don't pay attention to what's going on. Spiritual warfare doesn't work. All we have is just intellectual gospel. We just have a dead gospel. We just have nothing we can do. We can't judge anyone. We have to be so well balanced in our head and our thought that we can't make any judgments. Oh, no, we can't judge another man's servant. Oh, no. We have to be kind and gentle and all this stuff, which is true. You have to be balanced and level-headed, but you have to make a stand for righteousness. If you don't, the enemy comes in like a flood, and look where we're at. Or do you like it? So in verse 12, we have Daniel, whose God is my judge, so I can bear forth the judgment of God, not bowing down to the name of being a keeper of the little treasure. And that's how we got to be. So Daniel, then in verse 13, then Daniel was brought before the king, and the king spoke and said to Daniel, are you that Daniel? God is my judge, who I can bear forth the judgment of God. Are you Daniel, who is the one of the captives of Judah? I mean, Judah means the praisers of God, or praisers, ones who praise God. The captives of Judah, from whom my father the king brought from Judah. That's interesting. Now, Judah meant the ones who praise God. That's the idea behind it. It actually means being the praisers of God, the singers, the ones who extol and sound forth the glory of God. So those who praise and sound forth the glory of God were captives in Babylon. They're being made into a mixture to conform to the world. Has anything changed today? Look at the state of the church if you don't believe me. All right. So, and then he says in verse 14, I have heard of you that the Spirit of God is in you, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom are found in you. Verse 15, now the wise men, the astrologers, the necromancers, the people who talk to the dead and look at the stars and divine things, have been brought in before me, that they should read this writing and make known to me its interpretation, and they could not give an interpretation of the thing written on the wall. In verse 16, and I have heard of you that you can give interpretation explaining enigmas. If you can read the writing and make it known to me in its interpretation, you shall be clothed with purple and a gold chain around your neck, and you'll be the third ruler in the kingdom. Look what Daniel said. Daniel lives true to his name. God is my judge, so I can bear forth the true judgment of God. Listen what he said. Answered and said before the king, let your gifts be for yourself, and give your rewards to another. Yet I will read the writing to the king and make known to him the interpretation. How many Christians would do that? I don't want your rewards. I'll give you the interpretation, but I don't want your reward. I'm not going to bow my knee. I'm not going to become your ruler to help bring in the Antichrist into the world. I'm sorry. I'm not going to be part of Nebo protecting the crown to protect the little treasure here. I'm not going to be that. How many Christians have guts enough to say that? A few. Thank God there's a remnant. There used to be a lot more, but something happened. We'll find out in a minute. Then Daniel said this, O king, the most high God gave Nebuchadnezzar your father a kingdom and majesty and glory and honor. And because of the majesty he gave him, all peoples, nations, languages trembled and feared before him. Whoever he wished he executed, whomever he wished he kept alive, whomever he wished he set up, whoever wished he put down. In other words, he's saying, you ain't in charge. Nebuchadnezzar, your father, found out who was in charge. And it wasn't him. Okay. And there was a reason for all this. I don't have time to get into. I'll try to explain it like this. In the book of Proverbs, it says, God makes the wicked for a day of doom. Let me explain what that means. And I want to blow Calvinist doctrine out of the water. I apologize to Calvinists. It means that God makes the wicked to inflict a chastisement upon the rebellious people of God, Israel. So he makes the wicked for a day of judgment and doom. That's what that verse actually means. And this is what he's talking about in verse 19. But when his heart was lifted up, his spirit was hardened in pride, and he was disposed of his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. And then he was driven from the sons of men. His heart was made like beast, and his dwelling was in the wild donkeys. They fed him with grass like an oxen. His body was wet with the dew of heaven, till he knew that the Most High God rules in the kingdom of men and appoints over whoever he chooses to do whatever purposes God wants done. And look at verse 22. But you, his son, Beliashar, the prince of Marduk, the Bel, have not humbled your heart, although you knew all this. So Beliashar knew who Daniel was. He's 80 years old. He probably, he known him since he was an infant, because he was a very high position of authority there. Yet you're not humbled your heart, though you're not all, beside your own father trying to teach you to walk humbly before God, you did not. That's basically what he's saying. Look at verse 23. And you have lifted yourself up against the Lord of heaven. They have brought the vessels of his house before you, and you and your lords, your wives, your concubines have drunk wine from them, and you have praised the gods of silver and gold, bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which do not see or hear or know. And the God who holds your breath in his hand and owns all your ways, you have not glorified. Again, this is a direct reference to what I said in the first few verses here. Why they did this was to invoke the gods to lift the siege of heaven by doing sex rites and deep occultic magic in order to invoke favor. They do this stuff with in the Bohemian Grove with the sacrifice of care. They do it at the Burning Man celebration to burn an effigy humanity so they can arise from the ashes into a new dawn of a new golden age. They do this at Epstein's ranch and farm, which and island and all this stuff that happened, that now their names are on the guest books. These are the world's elites. This is what they still do. But he says that you're using this stuff in a profane. You profane the silverware and the goldware of the temple, and God is pretty much hacked off. That's what he's saying. Then the fingers of the hand were sent from him, and his writing was written. And this is the inscription that was written: many, many tekel up Parisian, up Parisian. I can't really pronounce it. Up Parisian. This is the interpretation of each word. Many, God has numbered your kingdom and finished it. Tekel means you have been weighed into balances and found wanting. Your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Let's go back and look at this. Well, look at this. I know there is a numeric code in this, and I won't tell you what it is, but it basically is saying pretty much the same thing. And when I do studying numbers and the biblical definition of numbers, not Chaldean or the occult world, but the biblical, and I found the number meaning, and also the Hebrew numeric system applies to grammar, and so I see Hebrew grammar. There are two words, and they did not have exclamation points, and they want to emphasize something. So many was God has numbered your kingdom. In other words, man, this is a bad thing. Pay attention. When you see two like in the book of Genesis chapter 1, chapter 2, the Lord says, if you eat of this tree, you will surely die. Well, the word is death. You will die. Two words emphasize, not surely die. It means this is bad news. So and the interpretation for the words are there. Daniel interpreted them, and there's no need for me to go over the numbers because it pretty much, and what they mean, because it pretty much says the same thing here. It just does. And so God has numbered your kingdom and finished it. In other words, you've been numbered. Your days are numbered and it's finished. It's over. That's what the many means. You're numbered your kingdom. Why? Tekel, because you've been weighed in the balances and found wanting. In other words, you lack. You're not humble before God. You don't recognize God. You're still worshiping gods of wood, stone, and iron. All that they represent, the false gods, the fallen angels. You're still listening to the fallen angels, trying to get a one world government, thinking that you can do the sex right magic and lift this siege of Babylon. And then Perez, your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and Persians. And that's exactly what those words mean. And that's what Daniel said, that the numeric meaning is a little slightly different, but it's the same end. Simply, it's your days have been numbered. You are you lack. The head honcho, your bloodline has been broken. That's kind of what the numbers mean, because you lack. And so this message is also for people who think that they're going to continue this bloodline in order to produce an incarnate of the sun deity on the planet. In other words, hey, you've been found wanting, you lack, and it's going to be given to someone else. And in the Bible, prophetically speaking, if you know the Word of God, in Revelation chapter 19, Jesus is coming back and he's going to rule the kingdom. In other words, you're not going to give to another worldly kingdom. In the final kingdom is going to be given back to God, and God's going to set things right. Okay, I'm just saying. But your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and Persians. And then Belshazzar, the prince of Marduk, gave him a command, and they clothed Daniel with purple, put a chain of gold around his neck, and made a proclamation concerning him that he should be the third ruler of the kingdom. And Daniel didn't want it, but he couldn't do anything about it. But he knew something. This is what he knew. Verse 30. That very night, Belshazzar, the prince of Marduk, king of the Chaldeans, king of the elites, was slain. And Darius the Mede received the kingdom, being about 62 years old. And that's the end of chapter 5. That's pretty cool, isn't it? So let's look here. Then Belshazzar gave the command. They clothed Daniel and all that. Daniel, he knew that his kingdom wasn't going to last. And so here's what happened. That very night, the king Belshazzar of the Chaldeans was slain. So this is what happened. The Medes and Persians armies, represented by the statue in Daniel chapter 2 of the silver, and came. Okay, they are the idea of silver mixing people together and how to get them to work together. Okay, so they came. They surrounded Babylon. Babylon was pretty much self-sufficient and could withstand pretty much any siege because it was self-sufficient with its high walls and anything. However, the weakest part of it was where the water flowed underneath the Euphrates. So they had the wall, and the water flowed underneath the wall and of the Euphrates River, so they would always have a plenty supply of water. So what they did was they built a canal and they diverted the water to go someplace else, and the water level slowly lowered. So by that evening, they could basically, the whole army could walk underneath, go along the riverbank, and go walk right underneath the wall. And that's exactly what happened, and that's how Babylon fell. And what's really interesting is archaeology backs this up. They actually found the palace of Belshazzar, and the very room, they found the very room where the finger in the wall wrote on the wall, where all this happened, where they found a courtroom that could seat over 1,000 people. And for this purpose, like I just said, they actually found this. They also have this in history. This all happened on October 12th, and I can't remember the year, 530 something BC, if I remember right. And so on October 12th, that party happened on October 12th, and that night, the kingdom, just like Daniel said, was given over to the Medes and Persians. So Daniel, whose name means God is my judge, so I can bear forth truthfully and honestly and effectively the judgments of God, was bore out right. And so here's Daniel, an old man. He doesn't have anything to lose. I mean, he doesn't want gold and silver. He knew what was going to happen. And so they snuck in. Historically, it's in the records, the history books, and the Medes and the Persians came in, and they killed Belshazzar. Many of his elites were killed and made to submit to Darius the Mede. Now, the Persian kingdom was divided into two parts. They had the middle or lower kingdom called the Medes, and you had the upper echelon of society called the Persians. The Persians were the elites. And so what the Persians and the Medes did, they joined together and they made deals with each other, and they became one empire. So they had like a split empire, so to speak, a mixed empire, to bring redemption and goodness to humanity by conquering the world. That's the idea there. And so let's look what Darius and Mede means. Darius is a word that simply means Lord, master, the one in charge, boss man, the king. So the Lord of the Medes, the word Mede, M-D-E-E, or M-E-D-E, means the middle ground. Smith's Bible Dictionary, I think, mentions that it means middle ground, the middle ground. So he was the Lord, the ruler of those living in the middle, on the middle road. There are a lot of people who want to live in the middle of the road, so to speak. They want to compromise with the hot shots and the rulers like there. So this divided kingdom, which was one kingdom, he was ruling from the middle of the road. Okay. So he received the kingdom of Babylon, being about 62 years old. Well, he was an old guy for that time too, but which is quite ironic because there's something happening here. So I'm going to talk about numeric meanings, the Bible number meaning of 62, not the Chaldean, not the occult version at all, but you listen to what it means. I was astonished when I looked up what the word, what 62 means. Before I do, I need to explain that the Hebraic number has meanings. Once you figure out how to read them, it's not too hard to figure them out. But they abide by rules of Hebrew grammar. And you have Bibles that kind of help you with that now, with like the New King James, NASB, ESV. They kind of stick pretty much with the literal grammar structure, the best you can to translate it from one language to another. So you have the means in order to work the numbers right there in the Bible. But so this has a context, and so the number meanings will match the context. That's how you derive a meaning of a word. So like in any dictionary that we have in our English dictionaries or whatever language you have, there is a root meaning, and then there are sub meanings and adjective and pronouns and so forth, and different adverbial meanings, so forth, etc., of different words. And so they take on another shade of meaning underneath of it. The same with number meanings. So I'm going to give you the three meanings, the basic definitions of the word 62, what it means, and correlate this. 62's root meaning means to be an anointed curse or a blessed amen, to bring to an end a city or household and those that rely on such, or you can be in a blessing and exalt a household. That's what the root word means. That's exactly what he did. He was anointed to be a curse to Beliashar, to bring a ruin into his household. Okay? That's the root meaning. The second meaning means to anoint or curse the reliance of strength of the household or any city. In this case, it was Babylon. It could be Jerusalem. It could be any city. It could be Washington, D.C. The second meaning of 62 is one who anoints or to bring a curse, to anoint, to bless with a blessing, or anoint with a curse the reliance of strength of a household on any city. I mean the world's elites, or not rely on it. It can also mean the anointed royal city of Jerusalem as the household of God's people, as living in a royal city that's been anointed and blessed of God, or brought about as anointed curse to bring them down and humble them because they forsook God. That's kind of what the number 62 means. So here you have Darius the Mede, the middle ground, became king, was 62 years old. He absolutely did put a curse on the household of Beliashar and killed them. And he reduced their strength and reliance upon that system and built up the Medes and the Persians' rule. See, God is highly intelligent, and numbers do have meaning, and they can add a little clarifying thing to the text that doesn't take away from the Bible, and really nothing new. You can probably find the same idea in the scriptures here as well as in commentaries. That's how smart God is. And that's what I found out is amazing about doing actual honest study about biblical numbers. And you have to be like Daniel. You have to know that God's your judge, and you cannot, under any circumstances, try to use biblical numbers in some nefarious, stupid way, like trying to divine the future, or win the Powerball numbers, or something to make you look like a big shot. It ain't going to work. God will. This stuff is very holy. I know some people don't like Bible numbers, but they don't understand them, and I understand that. And a lot of them I would agree with to stay away from it, because you're walking on something very holy, to add something. And if you don't understand how to use the numbers, you will start adding something into the Bible that should not be there, and you'll put a curse on yourself. I'm just saying. I found this, and this is what I found out when I studied the Bible numbers. So that is Daniel chapter 5. So I hope people, when you read this and you see this video, that you'll enjoy it and everything like that. I thank you all for coming today. If you have any questions, go ahead. I think we had a few viewers. I think we only have about one right now. And I guess I'll see who we have. Irish is here. Thank you, Iris. Any other questions, since you're the only one here right now, and other people? I think there's a few other people watching, but I can't tell at the moment because the numbers fluctuate on my end. I did have a question come up over the week, and they said, why do you not do this live streams at a better hour? It's because I live in a house. I have to work. My studio's in the basement, and when I teach or something, the house is not very well insulated, so to speak. So it's a smaller house. So what I say goes all through the house. So I'll wake everybody up. So I do these live streams knowing that you can watch them on your own convenience once they're uploaded. And then I will send links out, and then people can watch at their own leisure and their own time. And I also will be doing some live streams ad hoc as the state of Colorado opens up more, and I have some time alone to myself where I can do some more live streams and do some other things. So I was thinking, let's see, we have a few minutes left. I'm going to bring this up so I can look at it real quick. Hold on. I'm going back to chapter 2. What I do is I copy the scriptures that I'm going to be teaching out of the chapters, and I paste them on a Word document. I put the letters in a yellow background and make the page black, so I don't have a lot. I try to keep the glare off my glasses as much as possible when I do a live stream, but you can see the purple stuff happens anyway on my glasses. So Daniel chapter 2. So some people ask a question, where's Daniel chapter 2? Well, I already did it, but like I said, the YouTube video is pretty bad and choppy when I downloaded it. It used to be able to download really clean, but since they changed their system, it's really choppy. So it looks like it'll make you sick. It'll almost make you seasick watching me, because it flutters. It just jerks, just like this. And you hear the narration fine. So what I did in Daniel chapter 1, I copied that video down, and I just put pictures to it just to try to cover over it and made it a podcast. It's not the best study I ever did. It's early in the morning. I just woke up and kind of groggy when I did that one. But I'll do Daniel chapter 2 in chapter 3. I might do chapter 2 in just a few minutes, but I will end this video and start. Give me about 10 minutes, and I'll come back on, and I will let you know if everybody upstairs is awake or not. So just one of those things when you live in a small house. Anyway, I'll be back. I'm going to end this live stream, and I'll try to come back, and I can do Daniel chapter 2 as a review. Even if you've seen Daniel chapter 2, it'll be different. I'll do Daniel chapter 3 a later date. At least chapter 2 will be done. I can get at least 2 of these done and get people caught up. Daniel chapter 2 is an important chapter for this reason, because it sets the stage for every other thing that's happening in the book of Daniel, and sets the stage for understanding the book of Revelation as well. So with that, I'm going to end this live stream. on Daniel chapter 5. I'll be back in a few minutes. Give me about 10 minutes. So let's say about 9:05 to 9:10. I'll come back online and let you know if I can do Daniel chapter 2. I'll be right back. You guys be blessed in Jesus' name.